November 11th. November 11th is currently celebrated as Veterans Day, but it got its start as the mark of the end of the First World War, the armistice, which means ceasefire. The ceasefire all along the fronts of World War I in the trenches throughout Europe signified the end of the war to end all wars, and was celebrated as a holiday all the way up to and through World War II. It's as we started to conclude the later wars that we started to realize that armistice was only a part of what we needed to celebrate. As the United States got more involved in the world, and the soldiers started giving their lives in other places like Europe, the Pacific, specific conflicts like Korea and Vietnam, we started to realize that we needed a day to celebrate all veterans. Veterans Day is for those that have served in the military. They do not need to give their life for their country to be celebrated on Veterans Day. Memorial Day is the day that we set aside for that. Veterans Day is a day to observe, to celebrate, and to thank those that have served this country throughout the globe and in the armed services. Please take some time today to thank those in your family and in your circle of friends that have gone out of their way to serve their country in any branch of the armed forces, and to celebrate their sacrifice, of which there are many. I've attached 2 videos to this announcement. One of them is a video that reminds you of the sacrifices these soldiers are making as they go and serve in places around the globe. This does not need to be specifically in harm's way. They may serve on ships out at sea, they may serve on military bases in places unknown, or they may serve on the front lines. But today would be a good day to reach out to those people that have served and to thank them for their service. I take this very seriously personally for a number of reasons. Both of my grandfathers served during World War II. Both of them had stories, but they were reserved about it. They felt that they had served their country, but were very guarded about what they talked about. Neither of them served on a front line in World War II, but I did have great uncles that did serve. One specifically that was taken prisoner during World War II. And he went through a hell that I will never understand. I'm lucky enough to have his written history about that event, and I cherish that as one of my personal, kind of artifacts from my family history. So it's ingrained in my family that Veterans Day is a day to celebrate those that had served the country. But just to give you an idea of kind of where this all kind of comes from and why I'm so passionate about this. If you've never watched the movie Saving Private Ryan, you really should. Now, this is not a story about the actual movie. The movie came out when I was a freshman in college. I had a girlfriend from high school, and I had asked her, would you mind going to the movie with me? It's not an easy movie. If you've never seen it, the first half hour is exceptionally tough to get through. It's very intense. It tells the story of the D-Day invasion on June 6, 1944, and it's very graphic in its violence and in the death that occurred on that beach. It depicts the Omaha beach landing, which was one of the darker spots of that D-Day invasion. And even though D-Day ended up being an overwhelming success, it was through the sheer dogged determination of the men on the beach to get off that beach and to penetrate deeper into France, to bring salvation to the French countryside and break Hitler's hold on the continent. Now, the movie, of course, shows all that. As I was sitting in the movie theater watching this very disturbing 30 to 45 minutes, there was an older gentleman who was by himself, sitting in that packed theater. It was the first weekend that it had opened, and this gentleman was squirming in his seat, and I could hear him tearing up. At one point, I leaned over and asked if he was okay. He excused himself, and he said, "I'm so sorry, I'm watching my friends die again." He walked out of the theater, and before I could walk after him, I felt like I should give him a few minutes to compose himself. I didn't know this man at all, but I felt like I needed to go talk to him. Before I could do that, he came back into the theater, sat down, and I asked again, "Are you okay?" He said, "I need to do this." We continued watching the film. It's a very, very emotional film to watch. And as it finished, and the music was playing, and the credits were rolling, I looked over and his eyes were still wet. He had been crying through most of the film. I asked him again if he was okay. And he said he was part of that initial invasion. And even though he was part of the second wave of soldiers, everything he saw in the film depicts exactly what he saw on that day. He went through how important it was that Steven Spielberg had made that film. And we started to talk about why I was there. I had informed him that I was a freshman in college and that I was a political science major who was also thinking about possibly being a teacher. He said how important it was for me to come to videos like this and to experience it. And I started to ask him, how close was it to what you really saw? Now, for those of you that have watched the movie, again, you would know the first 30 to 45 minutes is very gruesome. He told me it was worse. That the movie didn't even come close to what the beach actually looked like, but that it had come close enough to make it accurate. While we were talking, a young girl was walking down the steps with her family, and she said, and I quote, "Matt Damon was barely in that film." Now, Matt Damon is a very successful actor, but he was a very young actor back in 1999. It was one of his first major roles. He was a teen heartthrob. Girls loved him. They loved to watch the videos. They loved him in the movies. And this girl had gone specifically to see Matt Damon play this role of Private Ryan. Admittedly, he was in a very limited amount of the movie, but that's not the point. As soon as she said that, the older gentleman next to me pointed directly at her and said, "That's why you need to teach, because she didn't get it." I did get it. I understood why he was putting himself through that. He said he owed it to his friends, that he would watch this film to make sure it did his friends justice who never came home. Like I said, Memorial Day is to celebrate those that gave their lives and are buried over in Normandy. I've toured that battlefield cemetery. It's not easy to walk through. It's massive. And it's not just American soldiers. There's a German cemetery. There's a French cemetery. There's a British cemetery. All throughout Normandy are graves of people that died. Memorial Day is to celebrate their sacrifice. Veterans Day is to celebrate the old man that sat next to me in that movie theater, my two grandfathers. Now, of course, those people have since passed away. It was World War II. Those people would be in their mid to late 90s. My grandfather just passed away last spring, and he was my last living link to the World War II generation in my family. But we still think about him on this day. And you should be thinking about your family members. Possibly you have grandparents that served in Korea, maybe in Vietnam. Maybe you have parents that served in the first Desert Storm, or in the most recent War on Terror. You may have friends and other family members that have served. Perhaps they served in peacetime. Regardless, when they chose to represent this country, when they chose to sacrifice for this country, they deserve the notoriety, they deserve the credit, they deserve the thanks. So I challenge you today to go out and give thanks to those that have sacrificed so much, even if it's just time away from their family and the country they love, to serve you and to give up part of their everyday life to make sure that you live safe, that you live free, and that you're protected within this democracy and this country. Happy Veterans Day, everyone. I challenge you again to reach out to those that deserve the credit today. That's what it's all about, and I hope you take it to heart.